So basically, we're gonna do two different things today, even if I titled them both like a spatial analysis. But those two spatial analysis is totally different from each other. One that we're gonna do in the morning is spatial analysis with a vector data. And the one that we're gonna do in the afternoon is a spatial analysis with the raster data. That's sort of like a GIS language. Vector spatial analysis and raster GIS analysis. That's a GIS language, but I don't want to super focus on GIS today. What I'm gonna do today is that I try to link GIS to the planning language and planning concept. The way we use GIS is that, hey, we don't want to use GIS for just create a map or, just for the, something for the GIS. I mean, as a planner, we want to use GIS for the planning purposes. So today's exercise that we're gonna do together is, we're gonna start from the planning concept and then how we're gonna use GIS to achieve or make this planning analysis done with the GIS, right? So I want you guys have a planning mindset, planner's hats, put the planner's hats, right? And then we can go from there. And I will introduce a lot of different sort of like measurement and analysis that we can do with the GIS. But one thing that I want to emphasize before we start today's session is that what we're gonna exercise today is not gonna limit it to the examples that we're gonna practice today. This exercise that we're gonna do today can be applied to so many different ways, right? So I want you guys to keep thinking about, what I can do this. And also, I'm not gonna be able to show you guys all the tools and functions available in GIS. The tools and functions that I'm going to introduce today will be maybe tip of iceberg that GIS can offer you. So I want to have some sort of mindset that, if I want to do something like this, there might be tools in the GIS. You name it, almost everything that you want to do, you can find the tool in the GIS. So I want you guys just think of the examples and exercise that we're gonna do today is a really handful examples out of unlimited things that you can do with the GIS. Okay, let's have that mindset in your mind, then you will be able to see the full potentials of the GIS capacity and capability for what you want to do, okay? First session is measuring built environment, okay? So see, I'm not using GIS language here, right? Everybody in this room may know what the built environment, we're planner, right? And we can measure built environments with the so-called geoprocessing tool, which is the tools that allow us to conduct the geospatial analysis with the vector data, right? So we're gonna use in GIS language. I'm gonna go explore a few geoprocessing tools. In planning language, we're gonna take advantage of those geoprocessing tools, and we want to measure or quantify the built environment. Okay. built environments, I mean, there's so many built environments, and then how to quantify and how to measure. This concept actually originated, invented by the Dr. Severo, who used to be a professor in UC Berkeley, and one of his PhD students, Dr. Kirkman. I believe Dr. Kirkman is now UT Austin. I mean, they suggest those 3D approaches, density, diversity, design. Whether these 3D concepts, they propose the theory that we can measure and quantify sustainable built environments. So, I mean, this idea becomes sort of like a mainstream method for measuring built environments since 1997. After that, so many other scholars and planners and try to add more Ds. So some people says 6 Ds, some people says 7 Ds, right? They add, they play with this word, right? They add key D, right? So there are so many different Ds and Ds and Ds nowadays. But primarily, there are 3 Ds, like density, diversity, and design. So how sustainable is this in our urban area? Can be measured by these 3D approaches. So, I mean, density examples, there's a lot of density, measurements there. The population density, job density, activity density, and density. Obviously, higher density mean, more sustainable, right? And for example, population density, we often, it is very common to, measures and calculate population density per acre. So let's say population density per acre in each census tract or census block group or whatever the units that we use it. But sometimes that so-called gross population density does not exactly represent population density in real world. I mean, for example, in a one census tract, what if half of the census tract is non-residential land use? If we divide population by, total acres of the census tract, that does not necessarily represent how real people fears the population density, because, half of areas, there's no people, no people live there, right? All those total population is squeezed into the half of the residential land use. So in that case, in order to represent the better population density, we use the net population density, which means dividing total population by only residential area, not the total area of the census tract. So there's a lot of measurements of the, 1D density built environment. One exercise, GIS exercise that I want to do with you guys is this. Calculating population density is really super straightforward. I mean, that's nothing, nothing complicated issue. I mean, yesterday we did an exercise calculating housing unit density, right? The one last exercise we did yesterday was like how, calculating housing unit density or something. But my question is this: what if the population density that you want to calculate has a totally different boundary from the census data? Census data, census population data comes by census boundary like a tract or block group. But what if, let's say, I want to do the TOD study. Everybody may not know what TOD is, right? So, I want to do everybody know what TOD is, right? So, hey, this is the train station, a train station catchment area, like a half mile. I want to see how many people live in this buffer area, half mile from the train station, for example. Then population data, we can, collect from the census by census boundary, but the boundary that I want to calculate my population is totally different from the census boundary, does not align at all with the census boundary. Then what am I supposed to do? Then let's say, oh, one very simple, less accurate approach is that, oh, okay, this census boundary touches with this buffer boundary, and I want to grab all the population of the census boundary that touch this buffer, and I want to assume that people living in this buffer. I mean, you can do that simply, but that's not accurate, obviously, right? Because this census tract, for example, barely within this buffer boundary, but if you want to take this 1,000 people, total 1,000 people living in this census tract, that doesn't make sense. So this proportional average approach is that, hey, this actually census tract is only takes 5% of this circle area, then I want to take only 5% of this population, right? So in this case, what? Like 5% of 1,000, then means 50 people. Oh, so we're going to assume this, 50 people living in here, and so on and so forth. So after we calculate proportion of each census tract that takes of this circle, and then we want to use that proportion as your weight value and multiply by proportion of each population in each census boundary, and we get the summation, then there will be the proportional averages. Okay, that's the so we get more geographical approaches, not taking total population in every census tract. Everybody get the concept? So I want to make sure that you guys understand where we're going, and it's kind of a big picture, the concept. I want you guys to understand it. Then we can use GIS tool called buffer and identity, and then we're gonna use a lot of tools that we practiced yesterday. Then we can do this proportional average calculation. I believe today's exercise will also help you guys to see the tools that you and the functions that you learned and practiced yesterday, and how they can be applied for the multiple analysis. Okay, so I will introduce new tools and functions, but also I will show you guys, we will practice how we can take advantage of those tools that we learned yesterday. Okay, so let's give it a shot. So why don't we bring the data? Let me connect my folder, data folder, to my GIS project first. And let me add the data. So on the session 1, the data that we need is population by block group and what? Study site. Right? So this population by block group layer I mean, literally, as the title of the data shows, spells out, I have like a population data in the attribute table. The geographical boundary of that layer is a census block group. And I have population field. For each block group, I have population data, right? And this point, I said study site, as I briefly explained in my PowerPoint presentation. I mean, this is you can, let's say, you can take it as your transit station. So if you want to conduct some sort of TOD study or transit catchment analysis, I mean, you want to create, let's say, quarter mile, half mile buffer, and then you want to calculate, you want to take a look at it, how many people living in there. Or another example is that you can take this point as your, let's say, fire station. And we want to make sure fire station can reach out to, in their service area in 5 minutes. Let's say, let's draw the 5-minute buffer. I mean, 5-minute buffer we cannot do with a simple geoprocessing tools, but like the Google Map does. I mean, Google Map exactly does not do that, but I mean, there is the GIS tool called Network Analyst. Let me show you Network Analyst. If you guys use the Network Analyst, you can create a catchment area that's automobile can reach out to, let's say, for example, in 5 minutes, following the roadway network. Not just very simple circular buffer, but very articulated buffer following roadway network, and we can type the, all those speed and hours and everything. And using this network analyst, we can do something called service area, catchment area calculation. We can do it, but I'm not gonna use that for now, right? But here, if you wanna, let's say, hey, this is a fire station, and this is the service area of fire station that's in circular buffer. How many people living in that service area, right? Those kind of calculation that I'm talking about, right? So obviously, first step is to create a buffer, right? Circular buffer. So in order to create a circular buffer, I want to go to the analysis tab. I want to open this toolbox, tools. And like the way that we practiced yesterday, obviously you can type in the keyword here, but I don't want to type the keyword. If you want to type the keyword, that's fine. But I'm a little faster than finding the tool directly from the directory. So I want to go to the toolbox, and I want to go to the analysis tools, and I want to go to the proximity toolbox, and there's a buffer tools. This is the tools that we're gonna use to create a buffer, okay? Everybody here? Then let me create a buffer. So apparently input feature is study site. Output feature class GIS will create a polygon shapefile or polygon layers. So we want to save that output. So let me navigate to the folders or geodatabase that I can save my output. Let me save in the geodatabase that I share. Why don't I call it study buffer? Okay, just simply name study Just output name,
Yeah, I didn't bring it.
right?
Wait, but these
Yeah,
charges.
upstairs wants it.
And here you want to choose, I mean, obviously we're going to give a linear unit. Let's say we want to give it a try to create a quarter mile buffer. Okay, just simply quarter mile buffer. So we can type in here quarter US miles, US survey miles. And you may remember the way that I explained yesterday, planar versus geodesic, right? So you can choose either one, and this is like a small, this study area is a relatively small area, right? Small area like a city level. So I think there's not much of difference. That let me just go with the planar for this exercise. And dissolve type, you may want to be critically think and choose the option here. What's the dissolve type is that, I mean, default is no dissolve. What's the no dissolve option is that when GIS created circles, right? And each individual circle will be individual records. So 7 dots, GIS will create the 7 circles, and then in the attribute table, there will be 7 rows. So individual entity will treat as your individual entity if you go with this no dissolve option. If you go with the dissolve all option, then GIS will combine those 7 circles into the one record. So when you take a look at your map, there's no difference. You will see the 7 circles, but when you open the attribute table, you will see the only 1 rows, right? So do you really want to care of each individual circular area, or do you want to define only within the inside of the circular area or outside of circular area? So you have to think what you exactly want to get out of it, and you want to choose the dissolve option properly. So I want to calculate population by each circle. So I want to go with the no dissolve option. So let me create a buffer. I mean, it's very straightforward, right? I mean, buffer is a buffer. We're going to create a circles. So as you can see, we were created it. We were able to create a circular buffer. It's a quarter mile buffer, right? And now, once again, ultimately, what we want is that we want to calculate how many people lives in this circle, right? It's not precise, but that's the best. The proportional average calculation is the best that we can do. So we want to calculate how many people living in each circles, right? And in order to do so, we have to how can I say, differentiate those census block group within the circle and outside of circles, right? Right now, obviously, there's no boundary or no clear way that we can identify area inside of buffer and outside of buffer. So in order to make that delineation, we want to use the tool called identity. So I want to go to the analysis tools and overlay. And under the overlay toolbox, there is the identity tool. And here, input feature must be the population by block group, that block group layer, and identity feature is buffer. Okay, and you may want to save this output. So let me save block group identity, or whatever name that you want to give. Just give it for the output file. And that's all you want to do. And the attribute to join, and it says or attribute, then GIS does not necessarily, does not only delineate the boundary of the circle on the block group layer, but also it will combine the two attribute table together. So let's take a look at it. So if you run, the tool, we got the output, right? Everybody see the difference between input and output? This is input, this is the output. So now, as you can see, GIS kind of, cutting it out the block group layer following the boundary of buffer. So now we can clearly see, hey, these are, right? Not they. Oh, I'm sorry. See, these are the area within the circle, right? Within the buffer. Everybody clear? So that's the geoprocessing tools that allowed you guys kind of smooth two layers together. On the top of that, if you take a look at attribute table of the output, as you can see, two tables from two layers, stuck together like a table joint. So here, this part is, up to here. That's the attribute table of block group layer, and from here to there was the attribute table from the study buffer layer. Okay, so two tables got together, right? So now what we want to do, I mean, theoretically, what we needed to do is that we have to calculate the proportion of this area within this circle. I mean, with the bare eye, I see about 25% of these circles, taken by this area, right? So what's the proportion of each polygon in this each circle that we need to calculate? In order to calculate, we need to calculate a precise acreage of each polygon, right? So here, acres value, but this acres value actually not precise, because this acres value in this field just simply carried over from the input file. So for example, if I show you these two examples, see, the acreage is exactly same, because acres value here did not automatically update it. I mean, this 183.6 acres mean entire this area before it, cut it out, before divided it. So we need to update that acres value, okay? So using the tools that we learned yesterday, I want to override this acres value in this acre field. So right click, calculate geometry. And I want to calculate area in the units of acres one more time. Just in a second. So let me select US survey acres and click and update acres value. Okay. So acres are updated. So if I show you how it works, is that now if I select those two polygon, now you see the acres value has been changed, right? So it's updated acres value. Now this is the acres value that we want. Now, as I said, if I want to calculate what the proportion is of this polygon out of this circle, all we want to do is that divide acres of this polygon by total acres of this circle, right? Acres of this circle. That division calculation that we need to do, but we don't know what the acreage of these circles, right? We have acreage value of each individual polygon in this acre field, but we don't have, denominator, which is the acres of this circle, right? That's quickly we can acquire. I mean, you don't have to do this. Let me quickly do it, and let me share the number. I mean, I can do that calculation really quickly. So let me quickly add acres value here in this circle buffer layer. Once again, you don't have to do this, okay? Let me share the number with you. I mean, this is something we have done multiple times, so you must know what I'm doing. So you don't have to do this. Let me just quickly acquire the total acres of that circle, acres of that circle. So let me share that number in the chat box soon, okay? So just be patient. Let me calculate it and let me share the number with you. So the acreage of the circle is 125.6637. So I share the number in the chat box so we can take advantage of the numbers, right? Simply now one calculation that we need is that, as I said, the proportion calculation, division of this each individual acres value by 125.6637, right? So let me add a new field. And why don't we do the division calculation in the new field? Proportion, let me call proportion. And data type, I want to use a float because I need the decimal places. And we close this window and let's do the, that division calculation that I was talking about. So using field calculator, I want to simply divide acres divided by that 125.6637, right? And if I do that division calculation, that's the proportion of each polygon in this circle. So for example, if I select all those polygon in the circle, right, those polygon in the circle, and if I sum up this proportion, I mean, you don't have to do this. Let me demonstrate it. if I sum up this proportion, obviously it should be 1 in total, right? Everybody see my point? See, the summation is like a 0.9999997 whatever. So it's not exactly 1, but that's the, almost 1. So that's the whole idea. We want to calculate proportion of each polygon in the circle. That calculation is done. Then I want to do the one more calculation. So next calculation is that how many people live in each, not each polygon, right? So that calculation is multiplication of this proportion and this population. Okay, so once again, I want to add one more field. And let me call pop, whatever names if you want to give. And also I want to use the float as your data type. One more calculation, very simple calculation using calculate field. So basically all I want to do is the population multiplied by that proportion. Okay, so that's the number that we calculate number of people living in each polygon. So once again, if we select all those polygon in each circle, right? And if we sum them up, this proportional population, that's the total number of people live within this circle. Everybody understand? So we have to add this number together to get the number of people in this circle. Okay? Yeah, multiply proportion by population. That's this proportion population. Okay? We good? Then how we gonna be able to do so is the way we did it yesterday. So if you take a look at those polygon in the same circle and same buffer, and if you take a look at them, that's the buffer ID right there. That buffer ID came from this original study site point file. If you take a look at that point, see buffer ID, not buffer in this case, like the study site ID 104, that ID means this circle, right? So by taking advantage of that ID, we can quickly summarize proportional population by that ID. So right click on the ID, the output will be table. So let me save here. Let me call proportional. No, let me name population by buffer, for example. And the field that I want to calculate is this proportional population field. The statistics value that I want to get is the summation, as I said, right? We want to get the summation. So I want to select sum, and I can leave everything as it is. I mean, this is the exercise we did yesterday, right? So if you guys click OK, now we have this final product, which is the population by buffer table. It'll tell you how many people live in each circle. You don't have to worry about this ID 0. This ID 0 mean, all those in polygon or area outside of buffer. So we don't have to worry about this, right? All we care about is that those 7 records from ID 100 to the 106, that 7 buffer area and buffer or study site, right? Then we can quickly sort of now join that population by buffer table to this buffer layer, for example. This is an extra step. I mean, you don't have to do it, but let me quickly do it and show you how to visualize this product or findings. So if I quickly join that final product table to the buffer layer, I can bring the population to the buffer layer. Then I can quickly visualize, right, which buffer area has more population lives, right? So just do the gradient color, population. If I do the image, it's just 7 records. If I go to 7, each individual value, we can visualize it, right? Done. So as you can see, we can take a look at it, population by this buffer area, right? And then obviously those 2 area has a higher number of the population lives it, and smaller size of smaller population size, right? So you can go from 0.9 yards from calculation to visualization, right? So that's the idea of a geoprocessing. 2 different layers which have totally different boundaries. And if you want to get some data summary from one layer to the another layer that has a different boundary, I mean, you can do that using this identity tool under the geoprocessing tools. Does it make sense, everybody? We're good? Yes. Right, then next exercise is about diversity. It's a bit tedious, but let's focus on it. So diversity means the mix of a lot of different things, right? So let's say, everybody know, like land use diversity, mixed use, we are super emphasized nowadays, right? That's what are we talking about here? Like land use diversity, land use dissimilarity, job housing balance, retail population balance, all those kind of balance and mix index we can calculate with the GIS, and a lot of diversity measure can be calculated with the GIS. What we're gonna exercise today is so-called land use entropy. Entropy is the index that represent a diversity. It doesn't have to be land use diversity. It can be any types of diversity. Let's say social diversity. If you have proportion of population by different ethnicity, then you can calculate social entropy. If you have, let's say, one common way this entropy index utilized is by environmental planners. When environmental planner calculates, like biodiversity within the limited area, how many different species exist or coexist, they calculate biodiversity using this entropy index. So entropy index, this entropy can be applied to any kinds of diversity calculation, right? The bottom line is that you need this calculation, like a ratio, like a proportion, exactly the same way that we calculate that proportional average. If we know the proportion of each land use within this limited given area, then rest of them is all mathematical calculation, right? So what we're gonna acquire from the GIS is the ratio of each land use. Then, similarly, as I said, proportion of each ethnic group or proportion of each species habitat, proportion of whatever, you name it. If we can get the proportions, then taking advantage of these proportion values, we can calculate land use at any kind of entropy, diversity index. When we calculate diversity index, like entropy, it always ranges the values from 0 to 1. 0 means the poorest diversity, 1 means richest diversity, right? So this is an example. If there is if we assume that there is a 6 different land use classification in this given area. So assuming all those 6 different land use are evenly distributed, then yada, 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 if we do the calculation, the entropy will become 1, which means richest diversity. 6 different land use are evenly distributed, and it takes each proportion evenly. But on the other hand, let's take a look at this bottom scenario. That means there's no, within this given area, there's no other land use exist. It's a comprehensively dominated by single family residential. Then yada, 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 if we did the calculation, entropy value will become 0. Obviously, that's the poorest diversity. Diversity, there's no diversity, right? So that's the concept. So we can do this land use entropy calculation using GIS. In this case, I don't even introduce any new tools, any new geoprocessing tools. We can do land use entropy calculation using all those functions that we learned yesterday. Select by attribute, you guys remember, summarize, table join, field calculator. That's all we learned yesterday. In this case, we don't even need any new geoprocessing tools. So why don't we give it a try? Okay, so we will have better understanding. So let me get rid of some unnecessary layers, right? Don't need this. So what I need, the layers that I need for this exercise is, if you go to the section 1, feature data set, there is a layer called land use. And we need a land use layer and block group layer, population by block group, right? So we needed those two layers. And if you take a look at land use layer, the table of the land use layer, I mean, we have, 4-digit land use code there, but this is like too many classification of land uses. For the sake of this exercise, I generalized this, detailed land use code into the 4 general land use classification. Okay, so if I visualize land use, general land use classification, right? So this is it. So I want to calculate land use diversity by this block group. So if I show you guys what is sort of like a concept, understanding what are we trying to do here? So obviously with a gut shot, do you see here this area? In this block group, I mean, there's no land use diversity. General land use classification 1 dominates, fully dominate this area. But if you take a look at area here, a lot of, land dynamics of the different land use going on. And if you take a look at, I don't know, some area down here, some, land use, dynamics is going on here. So you see what I'm talking about now, right? So visually, we can see which area has, mix of land use exists, or one types of land is dominating the area. We can visually observe, but why don't we quantify land use diversity by census block group? Okay, so we want to calculate land use diversity by each boundary. Now that black boundary, which representing the census block group. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So the first step, what we needed to do is that we want to get this number, ratio number. Okay, the ratio number. That's what we want to get. The ratio number that we want to get is that we want to get the ratio of each land use classification. In this example, we have 6 different land use classification. So we want to get the 6 different ratio values. Okay, but in this data, as I said, there is only 4 land use classification. So if we acquire a ratio of each land use classification, 4 land use classifications, then that's good enough for me. So to save some time for this exercise, I limit the land use classification into the 4 different classes. It's not really, how can I say, common to have only 4 different land use classification for the land use diversity calculation, but let's not worry about it. I mean, why don't we go with a, with these simplified examples? Okay, so that's where we are, and what we needed to do at this moment is to calculate the ratio of each land use classification. So obviously, the first step is that, I mean, we can use this shape area, which is the square feet value that GIS automatically generated, but I mean, I'm not going to use that. That number is too large. So why don't we use acres value? So let's populate acres value in a new field. Let me call it acres and float. Here's the data type. Let me add new field and let's populate that field. Let's populate that field with acres value. I mean, you must know now how to do so. We repeated this multiple times, right? So let me select I mean, since we have 4 different language classification, we have to kind of repeat, iterate the same process like 4 different times, 4 times. So, I mean, that's why I simplify this. I don't want to repeat. I don't want you guys to repeat same thing like 6, 8 times for the 6, 8 different language classification. So I simplify a little bit into like 4 different classes. Okay. Give me a second. I'm sorry. My computer is like super slow. Okay, so we got the acres value. Now, why don't we get this number? In order to get this number, which means the ratio value of one land use classification, we want to get the acreage of this land use classification, and then if we divide it by total area, then we can get the ratio, right? So the step that right now, what we are doing is that we want to get, for example, acreage of land use classification 1 by each block group. As you can see here, block group ID is handy here. So what I want to do is that first, I want to select general land use classification is equals to 1, right? 28,383 property selected it. This means then many properties are designated as your land use classification 1. Then, if I right click and if I conduct the summarize, then I can save this output called, why don't I name LU1 acres. And field that I want to calculate is acres, and I want to get the summation value. One thing that I want to clarify at this moment is in GIS, whatever you do, anything that you want to do and anything you do, if there is a subset of records selected, everything that you do is only applied with that subset. So in other words, if I calculate acres, summation of acres value for now, this means only for those records selected. So technically what I'm doing right now is that I'm calculating summation of acres of the general land use classification 1 only. Okay, so if I click OK, I have this output table. What this output table tells me is that in this census block group, there are 235 land use 1 property. Summation of acres of that 235 property is 143.78 acres. Okay, so this is the actually only for the land use classification 1. So if I repeat this process 3 more times, so for example, for the land use code 2, apply, only 292 records, right? So if I do the summarize, I'm not gonna change anything. Everything is exactly the same. All I want to do is change the name of the table, output table. This is land use 2, right? Click OK. And I want you guys to repeat this for the land use classification 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. As I said, this is a little redundant process. We have to do it. So I want you guys to repeat this process quickly for the all 4 different land use classification. Okay, so okay. So in my case, I did it all. So why don't you guys get those, 4 tables? Got it? I'll be right back. Okay, do we have all those 4 tables? Yes, good. All right, then why don't we take a look at the attribute table of population by block group, so block group layer. So as you can see, we have the acres value here. What does that mean by the total acres of this block group? So for example, if I show you one block group on the map, the block group here, the acres of this block group is like almost 50 acres. You know, some of this area must be land use classification 1, and no, it's a total. Okay, that's really odd. Okay, why don't I pick other examples? So for example, this one. See, this block group is right now, according to our data, is 125 acres, right? Some of this area is occupied by land use classification 1. Some of them is 4. Some area is 3 and 2, so on and so forth, right? So now we have, for example, we know how many acres of land use 1 within this block group, right? This number, land use 1 acres table tells us how many acres of the land use 1 in this area, in this block group. And 2, 3, and 4, so on and so forth. So if we divide this acres value in this table by this acres value, which is the total block group acres, then we can get this ratio or proportion number, right? This ratio or proportion value is the division of each individual land use classification acres by these total acres, right? So unfortunately, it's really manually, we have to repeat this like 4 times. So what does that mean? For example, is I'm sorry to ask you guys to keep adding the field. It's a little kind of drawback of GIS compared to the Excel, but we need to add a field. So we want to create a full field. Why don't I call LU1 ratio plot, and we want to create it LU2 ratio field plot as well. And we have to do LU3 ratio plot, LU4 ratio plot, right? So let's create a 4 more field in the block group layers. We want to bring all those land use acreage calculation to the block group layer, okay? Because we want to calculate land use entropy by block group, okay? So we created those 4 ratio value, right? And then why don't we join, for example, one table? So if we join my primary key is GeoID. I want to join land use 1 acres table, and I want to use my GeoID field as a foreign key. So GeoID, it's good. And if you take a look at it here, so now we nicely append to table. So the calculation that I want to do is that this field divided by this field, right? The land use 1 acres divided by total acres. Everybody clear? Everybody understand where we're going? Right? Right. Then let's do the calculation. So if I want to do the calculate field, and some acres divided by acre, right? And if I apply, I will have a warning message, but let me explain that. See, as I said, and as you can see, this field primarily populated it, right? But I got a sort of like a warning message. The reason why I got the warning message is because of this one field, one row right here. Because of this null value here. Null value mean there's no data. In other words, what does that mean by no data is that in this particular block group, there is no land designated as your land use classification 1. Everybody see? In this block group, there is no land use 1 property. That's why we have null value here. So null value is nothing's wrong. Null value is natural. But when we superimpose this mathematical calculation, I mean, this calculation is a null value, no data divided by some value. So GIS does not like this calculation, null value divided by acres value. That's why GIS give us warning sign, which is very natural and good to have that message. So simply, at the end of the day, what we want the value we assign for the case of this null actually is 0, because the land use 1 ratio in this particular block group should be 0, right? Because no land, so ratio is 0. So how we can kind of treat this kind of case more systemically, not manually like this. I'm just, scroll manually and showing this case to you guys. And then because I want to explain what's going on, but I don't want to check every single time, scroll this data and choosing those null value manually. I don't want to do that. Then what's the more systemic way is that I can select by attribute. I want to say, hey, whatever this some acres value is non-null. Then if I superimpose, I should be able to select all those records, which is non-null. So 79 records out of 80. So there is only one record is null value, right? Then I can superimpose this mathematical calculation for those records with a non-null value, right? So I did exactly the same thing. Actually, this value here does not change it, but I didn't get, as you can see, I didn't get any warning message this time because I did not include this record with a null value, right? Then simply what I can do is click switch button. This switch button allows me switch the selection, right? So switch the selected record. So now it's only one record selected. So what I'm gonna do is that I wanna assign 0 value for this particular record, right? So let me click apply, then it will get the 0 value, right? Then now I can drop the join. So remove join, remove all join. Done. Then we actually finish it ratio calculation for the one land use classification. Okay. So the ratio in this example is organized vertically, but in the GIS table, we want to do the ratio calculation horizontally, right? So, okay, it's 10:31. Let's take a 15-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to finish the ratio calculation. So I'll meet you guys back at 10:45. Okay. So as I mentioned before the break, what we're going to do is that we need to continue calculation of those ratio of the other 3 land use types. So why don't we quickly repeat that process? We did it just before the break. So for the land use 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I want to do the geo ID. I want to join the land use 2 tables. Do the same thing. I want to select a non-null value. It's not it. So okay. Let me select matrix non-null. Okay. I made a mistake. Okay. Made a mistake. So carefully repeat those process, for the other land use type. So let me quickly also do it. Yes. Okay, everyone. Actually, I finished those ratio calculation. Everybody did it? Everybody. Everybody finishing the ratio calculation? Hold on. Let me double check one thing. I don't like this number. No ratio is supposed to be larger than 1 theoretically, but I don't know how it got this value 3. That's odd. Oh, it's null value. Then didn't I assign 0 here? Maybe. Yeah, that's okay. All right. So everybody done? Can I move on?
Could you possibly uh refresh how you got the standalone tables with the acres? I know you summarized uh by the selecting by each land use and started
Right.
summarizing by the acres, but as far as it looks on the geoprocessing tool, I just wanted to confirm that you were summarizing to get the sum of the total acres.
Right. So all I did is that I have not used any geoprocessing tool. All I did is that I select each land use classification. So for example, general land use equals to 1. I select the property that designated as this land use classification 1, and then I summarize. Then I summarize this acre value, get the summation value of these acres by
The geo
GeoID.
ID. Okay,
I
thank you.
repeat that 4 times. Okay. All right, then I believe everybody is here. So now, if we check this long process, actually we made a progress, but we have not made a lot of progress. Actually, what we got is that this ratio, so the first column calculation is done. And from here to next is like a very straightforward kind of pure mathematical calculation. Here I use the terminology called ln. This is the name of the Excel function. Some of you guys are familiar with the Excel function, and there's a Excel function called ln. That's the natural logarithm. So that's the natural logarithm of the ratio that we need calculation. Okay, so hold on. What GIS is doing? I think so. Let me save this. So let's add formal field for the 4 different land use classification. Once again, it's a little tedious manual work, but why don't we create a natural logarithm field for each land use code? So let me call it LU1, LN, LU2, LN3, LU4, LN float. So I add 4 more fields for each land use classification. And we want to populate this field with a natural logarithm value. So in Excel, as I said, it's like if you guys are familiar with the Excel function, it's a natural logarithm. But in the GIS, if we use the field calculator and if you scroll down this function box on your right hand side, scroll all the way to the math, and there is like a math log. That's the natural logarithm command in Python. So all you want to do here is that put the field in the parentheses. So for example, LU1 ratio for the LU1 natural logarithm. Does it make sense? So this natural log calculation that we want to superimpose in this field. Oh, I got an error message. I don't know why I'm getting an error message. Why I got an error message? Maybe, hold on, the zero value? Okay, so let me try. I think the zero value, making a natural logarithm of zero does not make sense mathematically. So hold on, let me try this. So this is a little tedious. We have to repeat this, right? So let me select LU1 ratio, which is greater than 0. So after I grab all those, positive value larger than 0 value, and let me superimpose this natural logarithm calculation. And if I apply, as you can see, I can do the calculation without an error. So mathematically, log calculation for the 0 value does not make sense. Okay, so those records with a 0 value here in the ratio, we're gonna assign 0 to the natural logarithm as well. Okay, so we have to kind of, once again, we have to switch it, and let's assign the 0 value here. So we have to kind of back and forth and a toggle between 0 versus non-zero value, and we have to repeat this, by toggling. So it's a little more steps, but let's get the calculation done. So for example, now it's ratio, land use 2 ratio is greater than 0. I want to do this calculation, and I want to populate a natural logarithm field with that log formula. Right? And everything else 0. Right? So you have to kind of repeat this. I just simply assign the 0 here. I can get it. Yeah, my computer is really slow. Okay. Same thing. Ratio 3 is greater than 0. I want to populate land use 3, let natural logarithm Let this field then switch, then 0. One last land use classification. Zero. Okay, so I finish the calculation. So far, we made a progress up to here to the second column. I hope everybody finished the calculation. I mean, I believe your computer is better than my crappy computer. So, I mean, you guys are going to take a shorter time than I do. So I hope you guys finish the second column calculation, which is the natural logarithm calculation. And next calculation we need to do is the multiplication between the ratio and the natural logarithm of ratio. Okay, so simply this column multiplication and this and so on and so forth. Okay, so once again, why don't we create a formal field? I mean, this is the, almost the last. We don't want to create a more field, okay? So why don't we just create a land use one, Ln, whatever ratio. So whatever name of the field, they can easy to remember. And let's create a formal field. Okay, so let's do it. Sorry, this manual work, but I mean, we got to do what we got to do. I mean, this is like a perfect example that you may want to automate your analysis. And if you use model builder or Python scripting, this repeated process and redundant task, we can automate it. But I am not able to show you how to do so in this training. But there is definitely a way that we can automate everything. I mean, I don't usually do this manually step by step. I just, write it a code or model, build the models, and get it done, the work that way. But and that's not the scope of this training. So let's do the little manual work. Okay. I'm sorry, but I mean, that's what we gotta do. So after we created those 4 fields, why don't we calculate this field and populate this field with that multiplication calculation. So land use one ratio multiply by natural logarithm. So I want to apply this. And I want to Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I don't want to select anything. Hold on. And let me do that. Let me superimpose the calculation one more time. And in this calculation, you don't have to worry about zero value versus non-zero value because it's a simple multiplication. So we can just keep multiplying it without separating zero value from the non-zero value. So we can just quickly repeat, the multiplication calculation 4 times.
Are you going to symbolize the uh, block groups afterwards
What's
based off
that?
of, are you going to symbolize the block groups, the
Yeah,
polygons afterwards?
once we finish the calculation, we can definitely visualize the language diversity by block group. Okay. Okay, so I finish that multiplication calculation for the 4 different land use classification. So basically, those ln underscore ratio field is this ratio and ln column right here, right? So next calculation is that this column, like multiplication of a ratio by ln divided by natural logarithm value of not 6, 4, but 4. This 6 value representing 6 different land use classification. But in this case, we have only 4 land use classification. So we're going to divide this field by natural logarithm of 4, right? So, I mean, we can create another 4 field, not another 4 more field, and we can do that calculation. But in order to save time, let's skip the step that created a field. Instead, why don't we overwrite a value in this field? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do this, calculate value. And I want to simply divide value in this field and populate with a new value and divide by math log 4, right? So that's the natural logarithm. Once again, you can call it out, this command from the box, or you can just simply type it if you remember. So that's if we superimpose this equation, the value in this field will be overridden with a new calculated value. So if I click apply, you will see the value in this field, switch it, right? So as you can see, the value in there, just switch it. So let's repeat this 4 times for the 4 different land use classification. All I want to do is just keep changing this number simply. Right? And then apply. That's all I want to do. And land is 3. And land is 4. So I actually finish the calculation. So the bottom line is that, yeah, we made a great progress. We get the ratio and natural logarithm of ratio and then multiplication and division by natural logarithm value 4. So we made it up to this final column. The one last step is that get the summation value of all those 4 land use classification. That will be the entropy value, the final entropy value. So simply what I want to do is that I want to add one final field, entropy field, float, save, and let's do the one simple summation calculation. One thing that you need to remember is that when you do the summation calculation, we want to superimpose that abstract concept. So in other words, as you can see, all those value here is a negative value, but entropy value is a positive value. So when we sum them up, we want to convert this value to the positive value by superimposing absolute function, right? So to do so, in this entropy field, very simple addition calculation, right? So I want to do this plus this plus this plus this, but I want you guys to put that addition calculation within the parentheses, and you guys are going to type F's up front. That F's is the Python command to superimpose absolute value, okay? Everybody clear? So if I click OK, then I can finish my entropy calculation. Okay. voila, calculation is done. So let's map it. Like Erwin says earlier, now I can take advantage of that entropy value. I can definitely visualize that entropy value. Oh, I'm sorry, not you. What am I doing? Okay. So I want to visualize entropy value. See, higher entropy is better. So I don't want to use this red. So why don't I use the sort of like a red to green? So green is better. Right? So green is better. Red is bad. So as I said, the entropy value always range from zero to 1. So minimum value is 0, maximum value is 1. In this case, with entropy value that we got is from 0 to 8.6. That's the highest entropy value that we got in the city of Pomona. So here, this area, actually, if you have any local knowledge in the city of Pomona, that's the downtown Pomona area right there. So very high land use mix and land use diversity. And that's the where Carefully Pomona is. Entire this area is one, I believe, land use Carefully Pomona, other or something, whatever. So that's the obviously very low land use diversity. And this area is very interesting. Along that highway 71, new development popping up. There's a lot of, the mix of the commercial residentials there. So that's a kind of a very interesting growing area in city of Pomona if you have any local knowledge. So as you can see, we were able to calculate the land use diversity, and we can see which area or which neighborhood or which census block group area shows the high mix of land use, which representing really sustainable, built environment and land use, right?
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think there's a certain threshold where downtowns should be around? Like, for example, you can kind of see why there's downtown, how would have entropy, right? There's mixed use. There's probably some sort of apartments, probably around the edges, there's some sort of single family homes. But do you think there's like an ideal target as far as what downtown to try to aim for?
Actually, to be honest with you, there is no such a threshold or like a solid number we can put it in. The reason why is that, as you can see, land use entropy calculation is totally depends on how many land use classification that you want to plug it into this calculation. So really that index changes depending on the number of classification. It is very common that we use 8 land use different classification for this calculation, but that doesn't mean that's the one only absolute correct way. So it's really hard to clearly draw the threshold depending on this number. This number really is depending on how many land use type you have. Okay. But generally say higher value means, more mixed
Diversity.
dynamic land use. Okay. Anything else? Very good. Riley?
Yeah, I just think that's a very interesting question that Erwin asked, and I'm wondering just, and sorry if you mentioned this already, are industrial uses also counting towards entropy? So, because I'm just thinking about the fact that, if you have apartments, if you have multifamily residential near parks or near, stores, that's probably a good thing. That means more walkability. But if it's near like industrial uses, near factories and that cause pollution, that might actually be bad. So I could see how there might be some good entropy and bad entropy. But I just want to ask you, Professor
Right.
Kim, is industrial captured here as
Yeah,
one of the land
industrial
uses?
is captured in here. So let me show you the land use classification that I used, actually land use classification that SCAG used. That here, I took everything, every land use classification that City of Pomona has it. So this is LU 19 is the land use classification. So hold on. To be honest with you, I mean, obviously, if I go back and take a look at what, how I aggregate them together, then I can see which land use classification belongs to which general code. But this is the code that I use. I mean, this is the how scale defined their land use in the entire scale region. So I use this and I aggregate them just in order to simplify it. So industrial is definitely there, right? 13, the 4-digit land use code starting with a 13, that's the industrial land use code. So obviously, if you take a look at it, let me take a look at it here. So if I select any land use code begins with a 13, there must be some. So, I mean, I definitely include industrial, right? So more than 1,000 properties in industrial land use. So I definitely include them. So, I mean, what you're saying, I see your point. Your concern is that residential areas close nearby industrial land. So that's the land use mix, but that's not a good land use mix. But that's what you're saying. But here we don't, technically, how can I say, specify which land use is nearby which land use, right? Maybe, in other words, industrial land use next to the commercial versus industrial land use next to the residential. I mean, from the diversity point of view, that's the same diversity, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that industrial next to the commercial is a good mix and industrial next to the residential is the bad mix, right? So we don't actually specify that, right? Everything's nearby. That's what it is. So, if if you guys want to separate that, good mix versus the, bad mix, I mean, obviously you can exclude industrial land use from this calculation, but I didn't do that. Okay. Any other questions? Any other concerns? All right. If there's no more discussion about land use entropy, the bottom line, the point here is that, yeah, that's a little, complicated concepts, but if we make a progress step by step with this GIS tool. I mean, nothing special. All those attribute calculation tools we practiced yesterday. And if you apply these tools and functions to the land use entropy calculation, we can calculate land use entropy. Once again, this entropy concept does not necessarily only for the land use diversity. It can be applied to any kind of diversity, okay, social diversity, and you name it. Every kind of diversity calculation, we can apply this method. Once again, the starting point is the calculating the ratio, okay? The next exercise that I want to do is the some built environment index and measurement under this category of design. Like in the design, we talk about like a mixed use ratio or four-way intersection density and walkability index and a lot of things. Okay, so for today's exercise, what I want to do is that I want to do the calculation of like a walkability index. I mean, just a minute ago, Riley was talking about walkable environment. And what's the walkable environment, right? Walkability. So there's a lot of index that measures walkability. I mean, you guys may be familiar with something called walk score, right? Bike score that some company developed it and shared it, and you can access and you can take a look at it. That's the one index, walkability index. But the drawback of that walk score is that we don't know how exactly that index is calculated. I mean, that's the basically black box. And if you guys go to HUD, I believe HUD calculates walkability index for the entire country at the census block group level, census tract or block group level. I mean, I don't remember clearly, but that the HUD has their own method and they calculate walkability index. There's so many walkability index out there. One way to measure walkability index is very common. Walkability index is this intersection ratio, like intersection density. The planner sees that high concentration of intersection, high density of intersection represent more walkable environment, right? So the reason why is that if we have more intersection, then means we have more route choice. We can go this way, we can go that way, we can go straight. You can have a lot of options to choose your route. Another very important factors of high intersection density is that in the area with a high concentration of intersection, then means slower traffic. Where the area where intersection, the distance between intersections are closer, then the automobile cannot pick up their speed fully. So they have to, because they have to expect it, I have to stop. I may stop at the next intersection shortly, so they not catch up their speed really, fast. So that's why higher intersection, density means, slower speed, which means more pedestrian-oriented environment and little safer environment for the pedestrian. So that's why we use intersection density as your kind of one index for the walkable environment. But here, what I wanna use, the walkability index that I want to measure and I want to use is, we want to count how many intersections there, but I want to differentiate the three-way intersection and from the four-way intersection and give full score 1 to the four-way intersection and just half a score for the three-way intersection. The summation of the score, that's the walkability index. The reason why we just give a half a score to the three-way intersections is three-way intersection is, has a, how can I say, less route choice, right? At the four-way intersection, we have more route choice. And typically, three-way intersection representing like a cul-de-sac or kind of a closed road. So three-way intersection definitely has a less route choice than four-way intersection. That's why we give just half score to the three-way intersection, right? So, for example, if I count, each of three-way intersection, and if I assign score, half score there, half score there, half score there, one full score there, and half score 0.5 there, 0.5 there, and so and so. If I assign those score to all this intersection, and if I get the summation of all those score within this circle, for example, then that will be the walkability index for this study area. Okay, so that's the walkability index concept. So it's a little complicated, not complicated, it's a lot of steps, as you can see, and we have to have like a study area buffer, and this buffer mean this buffer, right? The study area buffer, and then we need another buffer, and then let me explain why we need another buffer a little later. And then we have to do some spatial join and summarize, table join, and field calculated, a lot of steps that we have to go through. But why don't I walk you through so that you can understand what we're doing and how we can calculate walkability index. Okay, so let's get started. So let me start over. So let me start my new map project. And I want to pull out the data. I need, hold on. So let me show you. Why don't we use intersection roadway? Why don't we use this two layers? Also, why don't we use the buffer layers that we created earlier? So study buffer, for example. So bottom line is that I want to calculate walkability index for each buffer, right? Once again, let's pretend that we are doing sort of like a TOD analysis. So, I mean, this buffer representing catchment area of each TOD's potential TOD site, and let's calculate the walkability index for that catchment area. Okay, so that's the scenario. And with the bare eye, eyeballing it, I mean, obviously this area and that area has really good walkability, and this, and maybe here that's a relatively low walkability. I mean, a lot of intersection, a lot of four-way intersection, but here intersections are mostly three-way intersection and smaller number of intersection. I mean, I can see that, but I mean, we can calculate walkability index. Okay. So the first step is that we have to differentiate three-way intersection from the four-way intersection. Okay, so here, if you guys take a look at it, I mean, obviously, I know this is a four-way intersection. Let me make it a little larger so they can see better. Right, obviously, a four-way intersection, three-way intersection, 3, 4, 4, so on and so forth. But if you take a look at intersection attribute table, there is no classification 3 or 4-way intersection. This is just simply nothing but just dropping the point at the intersection, right? So we have to, the first step that we needed to do is that we have to figure it out which one is the 3-way intersection and which one is a 4-way intersection, right? And how to, it's very simple. Geometrically, if we take a look at geometry of those relationship between this intersection and this roadway, right? For example, if this point, which is intersection, touches 4 roadway segment, then that's 4-way intersection. If this intersection point touches only 3 roadway segment, then that's a 3-way intersection. We can see that so-called spatial relationship, right? So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna use spatial join tool, which we practiced yesterday, and then we're gonna figure it out that relationship between intersection and roadway segment. Long story short, how many roadway segments each intersection point touches, okay? We can use the spatial join. But before we conduct spatial join analysis, I want to create a little tiny buffer. I mean, we don't have to do this step, but it'll be visually clearer. So I'm doing this extra step, but let's not worry about that extra part. Why don't we to understand this, my point. So I want to create a little tiny buffer around intersection. The reason why I want to create a little tiny buffer here is that, hey, I want to see how many roadway segments each intersection touches, but you know, in the entire world, in the earth, if I want to figure it out the spatial relationship between the point and line, that doesn't work very well, okay? So to make a little clear, to figure it out, little clearer relationship, all I want to do is I want to simply convert this point into the polygon, so that polygon, the relationship between polygon and line, it will be a little clear, right? So dropping the point, you know, one point on the surface of Earth and draw the one line and figure out this point touch this line, it does not work very well, okay? So all I want to do right now is that I want to just create a little tiny buffer. Simply, I want to convert that point to the polygon. So let's use the intersection. Yeah, let me save it as your intersection buffer. That's totally fine. Let me save intersection buffer. Why don't we just create a little tiny? How about just 5 feet buffer? That's good enough. Everything's as it is. Why don't we just create a 5 feet buffer? Once again, little tiny buffer. Okay. So as you can see, we created a buffer, and as you can see, you know, you can hardly see. So now we created a buffer. Now, if we kind of relate this buffer and this segment, that will be easier or clearer for the GIS to make a relationship between polygon and line. Okay, I mean that's the only reason that we created a buffer. And then what we're gonna do is that using spatial join tool, we want to make a spatial relationship between the buffer, that intersection buffer, and roadway segment. Okay, so let's use spatial join tool. And either way is okay. I mean what I mean by that is that, you know, there is a target feature and join feature that we have to pick. And, you know, once again, this is the relationship between roadway and intersection buffer. Which one supposed to go to the target feature and which one supposed to go to the join feature? Either way is okay. But let me go with, let me pick intersection buffer as my target feature and roadway as my join feature. Once again, if you guys remember the concept of primary table and foreign table, target feature is primary table and join feature is foreign table. Okay, everybody clear? I want you guys to remember that information we need soon. Okay, so let's create a output file. Let me name road and intersection. Just name this way. Okay, output name, and it is $1 million question that do we need one-to-one relationship or one-to-many relationship? Which relationship will represent what we're trying to do here?
One-to-many.
One-to-many, right? Because one intersection touches multiple roadway segments. Once again, this number one means this number of record in intersection buffer, and the number after 2 mean number of record in the roadway. So one-to-many, one intersection buffer touches multiple roadway segments, right? So that's what it is. So we're gonna shoot this spatial join tools. And I got the output. So let me show you how this output tell us something. So if I open the attribute table, of the output, and let me explain. Because we selected the one-to-many relationship, and if, let me show you this example, okay? So if I select the one buffer there, as you can see, I selected the one buffer. It looks like I selected the one buffer on the map, but if you take a look at attribute table, see, I selected the 4 records are selected. Everybody see that? That means this is a 4-way intersection. During this process of spatial join, since we selected the one-to-many relationship, GIS duplicated a record whenever, you know, intersection touches one roadway segment. So this roadway segment, and I'm sorry, this intersection buffer touches 4 roadway segments, GIS created a full record of output. So if you take a look at here, target FID and join FID and ID here, the target FID, or 505, that's the ID of this buffer. In other words, that's the ID of this intersection point. So if I show you the intersection point ID, just see, if I select this intersection point, see that intersection ID is 504. So that 504 ID here, that indicates that's intersection ID. And the Dynamap ID and Dynamap ID and join FID, that's the ID of the roadway segment. Okay, so if I take a look at this roadway segment, for example, Dynamap ID is like whatever and 2483. So 2483 right there. That's that intersection, that the roadway segment that indicates. And object ID is 6104. That join FID is 6104, right? So long story short, during the spatial join process, GIS duplicates all those records whenever each intersection buffer touch each roadway segment, right? So that's why when I selected this buffer output at the spatial join output, 4 records selected it together. Similarly, if I select that spatial join output right there, it is selected the 3 record because that's a 3-way intersection that's touches 3 roadway segments, right? So spatial join somehow, some way help us to figure it out, 3-way intersection or 4-way intersection. It's not perfect yet, but we can kind of see what's going on, right? So what does that mean is that if I take advantage of this ID field, for example, right click on the ID field, and if I summarize it, and if I name the output table, let's say intersection type, my name intersection type, and then we have to do anything much, but just why don't we do this? Why don't we just select object ID? It's just a formality. It's not that terribly important. And we're gonna select here count, right? So I want to basically what I'm trying to do is that I want to count number of records that share same ID value. In other words, if you take a look at those 3 records here, those 3 records 000 sharing same ID, then I want to count they are 3, right? So I want to count number of records that share same ID value. That's what I'm trying to do here. So if I executed it, I got the output table right here. And if I open the output table right there, so see, it says 3 or 4. Whatever that intersection ID with this frequency, I mean, it's basically, consistent value, right? Count value or frequency. So whatever is this field says 3, that means a 3-way intersection. Whatever this field says 4, that means 4-way intersection. Okay, so if I join this table back to my intersection table, I can see, oh, this is a three-way intersection or four-way intersection, right? So before we do the table join, why don't we add a score field that I want to assign value either 0.5 or 1 to the each intersection depending on the type of intersection, okay? So in my intersection table, which is the intersection layer table, let me add a field. Why don't I title it a score? And why don't we use float? Because we want to assign 0.5 value that has the decimal places. So I want to use the float as my data type. And this will be the placeholder for the walkability score or intersection score. And after adding this field right there, why don't we join this intersection type table to this intersection layer? So let me do the table join, add join, ID field is my primary key, intersection type, and same ID field is my foreign key. So again, this is something we practiced yesterday, even today, right? So I want to click OK. Then we can bring this three-way, four-way intersection classification into my intersection layer. So if I select that frequency is equal to 3, then that's all three-way intersection that I selected, right? Then I want to assign the score 0.5 for the three-way intersections, right? I'm going to click apply. Then I assigned score 0.5 to the three-way intersection. Rest of them. So if I click switch, I mean, theoretically, rest of them is all four-way intersection. If I double check it, I mean, there is actually five-way intersection as well. One five-way intersection. I mean, that's okay. So if we take a look at that five-way intersection, is the case like this. Everybody see it? That's the five-way intersection. I mean, what's it? It makes sense. GIS read as your five-way intersection. That's fine. Why don't we just assign the score 1 for all these four-way or five-way intersection, right? So let's not worry about that five-way intersection. Why don't we just assign the score 1 to those intersections? Right? Then I can get rid of this table join for sure. Okay, so what we did is that we figured it out, and we differentiate three-way intersection from the four-way intersection, and we assign the score 0.5 to the three-way intersection and full score 1 to the four-way intersection. Okay, so that's what we have done so far. So this, from beginning up to here, we made a progress, and it is noon, so why don't we take a lunch break, and when you guys come back, let's finish this part up. I believe we have time to do this, continue this exercise after the lunch break. Okay, so why don't we take a lunch break, and let's finish this walkability index calculation after the lunch break. Okay, so I want you guys